I could also ask, are you aware of why the FBI is looking into Senator Graham's death? Have you gotten any updates on why they were at his home?
Well, I don't know why, because I think, he had a problem. His father had a very similar problem, as you know. It's very unique. At first I heard it was clogged arteries, because he did have clogged arteries. He had a problem with that. He was, I wish he took better care of himself. I say, you can solve that problem, but what happened is actually something that's very hard to detect. It was not related to any blockage. It was a totally different thing. And supposedly, and I've watched all the medical reports, I've had the doctors from the White House come in and explain what happened. And this is something that is almost undetectable. And if it happens, there's not much you can do about it. It sounds unfortunate, but there's not much you can do about it. If you look at his father died of the same thing at about the same age. So there was not much. They say it's almost undetectable. You can detect it by if you have a very bad back. That's a sign. It's a bad sign. So if anybody has a bad back.
Hey everyone, it's John and this one is serious. When Lindsey Graham died, the internet didn't mourn it, investigated, flooding social media with wild theories, cryptic posts, and red circle thumbnails. The information ecosystem swallowed the moment whole, turning grief into speculation before the family could even process their loss. The reaction to Graham's death tells you more about our current political moment than almost anything else happening in Washington right now. Within hours of the news breaking, social media was not engaged in respectful remembrance. Social media was engaged in investigation. Commentary channels rushed to post content with titles designed to generate maximum engagement. Another accuser has come forward. There are things they don't want you to know. The FBI is already involved and being told to stand down.
US President Donald Trump has said that he's aware of the conspiracy theories circulating around the sudden death of his ally, Senator Lindsey Graham, but declared that the FBI was wasting time investigating the matter. Trump was responding to reporters in the Oval Office who asked him why FBI agents were at Graham's house just blocks from the Capitol on Monday after the 71-year-old senator's death on Saturday night. Washington's chief medical examiner said a preliminary examination of Graham found a rupture of his aorta due to a hardening of his arteries.
Well, I don't know why, because I think, he had a problem. His father had a very similar problem, as you know. It's very unique. At first I heard it was clogged arteries, because he did have clogged arteries. He had a problem with that. He was, I wish he took better care of himself.
Conspiracy theories are doing the rounds. Far-right activist and conspiracy theorist Laura Loomer pointed to Graham having just returned from Ukraine, where he pushed for sanctions against Russia before his death. Senator John Cornyn.
The content was shared thousands of times, viewed hundreds of thousands of times, and the comment sections went absolutely wild with speculation, accusation, and certainty about things that had not been verified by any credible source. People were absolutely convinced that something sinister had happened, that a cover-up was underway, that the truth was being suppressed. And most of those people, the ones sharing and tagging and commenting with such confidence, had no idea that the core explosive accusation at the heart of the story was not actually verified by a single credible news outlet. Not one. This is wild when you stop and think about it.
Called for the release of a toxicology report to rule out any foul play. Confusion deepened further after FBI Director Kash Patel said that the Bureau was assisting local authorities and had made all necessary resources available. Thereafter, FBI agents were seen outside Graham's house with no official explanation for their presence there. Why does the FBI need to be at his house? However, President Trump said that he doesn't see any evils there, adding that an aortic tear is very hard to detect.
You can solve that problem, but what happened is actually something that's very hard to detect. It was not related to any blockage. It was a totally different thing. And supposedly, and I've watched all the medical reports, I've had the doctors from the White House come in and explain what happened. And this is something that is almost undetectable. And if it happens, there's not much you can do about it.
On Monday, South Carolina governor appointed Graham's only sibling, Darlene Graham, to fill out the remainder of her brother's term, which ends in January.
The rumor spread anyway because that is how the modern information machine works. The allegation always gets ahead of the facts. The speculation always outpaces the verification. And by the time anyone actually checks, by the time the credible outlets have done their reporting and published their findings, half the internet has already made up its mind and is not going to unmake it. The damage is done, the belief is cemented, and the correction, if it ever comes at all, gets a fraction of the attention that the original claim received. This isn't an accident. This is the system functioning exactly as designed. The algorithm rewards engagement.
I could also ask, are you aware of why the FBI is looking into Senator Graham's death? Have you gotten any updates on why they were at his home?
Well, I don't know why, because I think, he had a problem. His father had a very similar problem, as you know. It's very unique. At first I heard it was clogged arteries, because he did have clogged arteries. He had a problem with that. He was, I wish he took better care of himself. I say, you can solve that problem, but what happened is actually something that's very hard to detect. It was not related to any blockage. It was a totally different thing. And supposedly, and I've watched all the medical reports, I've had the doctors from the White House come in and explain what happened.
And nothing drives engagement like outrage and mystery. So the most sensational claims always rise to the top, regardless of whether they have any basis in reality. Now, here is where the story takes an unexpected turn that almost nobody is talking about correctly. The mainstream press kind of glossed over this part. The commentary channels definitely did not want to highlight it. But the verified reporting from credible outlets tells a very clear story about how the president responded to all of this speculation. Trump looked at the swirling theories surrounding Graham's death and essentially told the FBI to move on. He said the agency was wasting their time investigating this kind of speculation.
And this is something that is almost undetectable. And if it happens, there's not much you can do about it. It sounds unfortunate, but there's not much you can do about it. If you look at his father died of the same thing at about the same age. So there was not much. They say it's almost undetectable. You can detect it by if you have a very bad back. That's a sign. It's a bad sign. So if anybody has a bad back, it's a pretty rough thing to think about. But the fact that's one of the primary signs. And he would tell me he had a bad back. But little did anyone realize it was for that. So, and when that bursts, which it did, it burst, there's not much. So I don't see a lot of evil there. I know there's all sorts of conspiracy theories going along, and I don't think the FBI, I think the FBI is wasting their time if they're doing it.
He saw no evidence of foul play. He saw no evidence of anything sinister or evil happening around Graham's death. Just nothing here. Move on. Let the man rest. And then, a few weeks later, he stood at a podium at Graham's funeral and praised him, called him a patriot, called him a war hawk, honored his decades of service in the United States Senate. Think about the significance of that moment. The same people who had been posting conspiracy content about Graham just weeks earlier suddenly had to figure out how to respond. Because the guy they follow, the guy whose every word they amplify, had just told them the theory was wrong. He had publicly and directly contradicted the narrative they had been spreading. And that created a tension that most of the commentary channels simply could not resolve. They couldn't attack Trump for dismissing the conspiracy without undermining their own credibility with their audience. They couldn't ignore Trump's statement without acknowledging that the leader they support had just told them they were wrong. So they mostly just moved on, pretending the whole thing hadn't happened, pretending they hadn't spent weeks building content around allegations that the president himself had dismissed as baseless. That part really did not make the thumbnail. So why does this story matter so much right now? It's not just about Lindsey Graham. It's not just about the sad fact that a major political figure died and the internet immediately went looking for a mystery. It's about a pattern. It's about the gap between what goes viral and what is actually true. and how that gap is getting wider and more dangerous with every single news cycle. It's about how the president navigates loyalty, legacy, and public grief when the political machine is trying to turn his ally into content. And it's about what happens when millions of people are consuming political information from sources that have zero obligation and zero accountability to get it right. This is the information environment we all now inhabit, and understanding how it works is essential to understanding American politics in this moment. The complexity of who Graham actually was is essential to understanding why his death became such a magnet for conspiracy content. Lindsey Graham was a senator from South Carolina for decades, a war hawk, one of the most consistent voices for American military engagement and foreign policy strength in the entire Senate. He believed deeply in NATO. He believed in supporting allies like Israel and Ukraine. He had personal relationships with foreign leaders that were built over years of real engagement. Not photo ops or summit handshakes, but actual working relationships that translated into real policy leverage. When Graham cared about something, he could pick up a phone and get someone on the line who actually mattered. That kind of influence is rare. And it was recognized across party lines, even by people who disagreed with him on basically everything else. But here's the part that made him such a target. Graham also had one of the most complicated public evolutions in modern American political history. He was one of Donald Trump's harshest critics in the years before Trump first took office. He called Trump dangerous. He called him unfit. He said things about Trump on camera that Trump himself famously never forgot or forgave easily. And then something shifted. Graham flipped gradually. And then all at once, he became one of Trump's most vocal and reliable defenders in the Senate. He flew down to Mar-a-Lago. He defended Trump after some of the most contentious moments of Trump's first term. He kept showing up, kept supporting, kept being available when Trump needed a Senate ally to go on camera and make the case. You can debate why that happened. You can speculate about the motivations, political survival, genuine conviction, a change in views on what the Republican Party needed to be, or something else entirely. But what you cannot debate is the outcome. By the time Graham died, he was one of the most important and loyal allies Trump had in Washington. That is just the documented record. So when Graham died, the internet did not react with nuance. The internet reacted with heat because Graham had real enemies on the left who never forgave him for years of blocking things they cared about and shielding Trump from consequences they believed he deserved. And he had complicated feelings from people on the right too, some of whom remembered his early anti-Trump phase and never fully trusted the conversion. And on top of all that, Graham had a personal life that had been the subject of speculation for years. Tabloid-level stuff, unverified rumors, commentary that circulated in the dark corners of political social media for a long time before his death. All of that existing material, that whole ecosystem of resentment and speculation, was just sitting there, loaded and ready. And the second Graham died, it detonated. That is not an accident. That is the machine working exactly as designed. Let's talk about how the rumor machine actually works, because understanding the mechanics is the most important thing in this entire story. Step 1, something big happens. A major political figure dies. Step 2, someone with a decent-sized audience, or even just someone with a provocative take and good timing, posts something vague and leading, not necessarily a specific claim, maybe just a question. What aren't they telling us? Has anyone looked into this? Why is the FBI suddenly involved? That kind of thing. Step 3, the algorithm sees the engagement and amplifies it. Not because the content is accurate, not because it has been checked, just because it is getting clicks and comments and shares. The platform is rewarding the rumor in real time. Step 4, other creators see the trending topic and pile on because the clicks are there and the topic is hot. Now you have a whole ecosystem of content, each piece a little more specific and a little more confident than the last, building a story out of almost nothing. Step 5, and this is the step most people never see, a credible outlet finally does the actual reporting. They check the sources, they talk to people who actually know things, they find that the core claims do not hold up. But by then, the rumor has already completed its entire life cycle. It has already shaped what millions of people believe, and the correction gets a fraction of the attention the original claim got. That is the machine. And it ran exactly on schedule with Lindsey Graham. The commentary channels were pushing this line about a new accuser coming forward, a new accusation, something explosive and specific that was supposedly going to change everything about how we understood Graham's life. And the verified reporting from Reuters, from AP, from the major news wires that have actual editorial standards and actual fact-checking processes does not support that claim. The sources being cited in the viral content did not check out under scrutiny. There was no verified new accuser. There was no verified new revelation. What there was a headline-shaped piece of content formatted to look like breaking news that got shared by millions of people who were already emotionally primed to believe something sensational. And it spread anyway because the formatting was convincing and the emotional readiness was already there. That is the formula, and it works every single time. The human brain is wired to process information efficiently, and when it sees a headline that looks like news, it registers it as something that happened. It files it as a fact. Even if you later see a correction, even if you later read the debunking, the original claim has already taken root. Researchers who study this call it the illusory truth effect. The more you encounter something, even something disputed, even something framed as a rumor, the more familiar it becomes. And familiarity reads like truth to the human brain. We are hardwired to trust the familiar. So these commentary channels are not just generating views and revenue, though they absolutely are doing that. They're actually shaping what millions of people believe in a way that is genuinely difficult to reverse. The Graham situation is a perfect case study in this dynamic. The verified reporting does not back up the most explosive claims. But if you only consume content from certain corners of social media and YouTube, you would never know that. You would just have the claims sitting in your head, quiet and comfortable, filed as probably true. And once a belief is in there, really in there, it takes a lot more than one correction to pull it back out. That is the problem. And it is not going away. The information ecosystem has been structured to reward the most sensational claims, regardless of their accuracy. The platforms are designed to maximize engagement, and nothing drives engagement like outrage and mystery. So the content that performs best is the content that makes people feel like they're discovering something important, something the establishment doesn't want them to know, something that validates their existing suspicions. The truth, which is often more complicated and less exciting, simply cannot compete. Now, here is what makes the Trump angle so genuinely surprising and so underreported. Think about the incentives. There were and still are large and engaged audiences online who are ready to believe something dark about Lindsey Graham. Tapping into that energy would have been easy. It would have generated massive attention. Posting something ambiguous and letting people run with it would have cost Trump nothing. But he did not do that. He went the other direction completely. Reuters reported that Trump addressed the speculation directly and clearly. He said the FBI was wasting their time. He saw no foul play. He saw no evil. Shut it down. And then on top of that, he went to Washington National Cathedral for the funeral. He delivered a eulogy. He talked about Graham as a friend. He recalled specific memories. He cited Graham's character and his service and the personal affection that had built up between them over years. This was a relationship that most people, especially most of Trump's online audience, probably did not fully understand or appreciate. They had seen Graham evolve from critic to defender, but they hadn't necessarily seen the personal dimension of that evolution. They hadn't witnessed the private conversations, the shared meals, the moments of genuine connection that had transformed two former adversaries into something closer to friends. And Trump showing up like that with that level of genuine tribute put the conspiracy content in direct conflict with what the man those channels claimed to support was actually saying and doing in the real world. That tension is the whole story. That is what most people miss. Trump was clear, no foul play, FBI is wasting their time, move on. And then he backed it up with his presence at the funeral in Washington at the National Cathedral, with world leaders in attendance. Reuters confirmed that Netanyahu and Zelensky were both expected to be there. This was not a quiet, private tribute. This was a full state-level event, and Trump was front and center, speaking from the heart about a man who had been his enemy, then his ally, and then something closer to a genuine friend. That is a complicated story, a human story. And the conspiracy machine had no room for it, because complicated and human does not convert. Simple and explosive does. So the machine went with explosive even when the facts would not cooperate. And that is the lesson we need to carry out of this story and apply to the next one. Because there will be a next one. There always is. The information environment has been structured to produce these cycles of speculation and backlash. And until something fundamental changes about how we consume and share information, they will keep happening. Trump's response was more significant than it got credit for, and not in the way most people think. Trump is not someone who normally turns down a chance to stir the pot. He is not someone who typically deflects from drama when the drama could benefit him. So when he came out and explicitly said the FBI was wasting their time, that is worth noticing, because he had every reason to let the speculation breathe. His base loves a conspiracy. His critics were already going to believe whatever they were going to believe. And letting the rumor swirl about a dead senator would have cost him nothing politically. Instead, he did the opposite. He cleared the air. He said there was no foul play. And then he went to the funeral and gave a real eulogy for a man he genuinely cared about. Trump called Graham a war hawk, an American original. And that language was not boilerplate. It reflected the actual texture of their relationship. Two people who clashed, then tested each other, then built something real out of the wreckage of their early hostility. And Trump showing up for Graham in person with real words at a real funeral says something about the way Trump handles actual loyalty. When it is real, it does not bend to viral pressure, even when that viral pressure is coming from his own audience. This story shows exactly how political misinformation spreads and who benefits from letting it spread unchecked. Here is the uncomfortable truth that nobody in the commentary space wants to say out loud. The channels running those grand conspiracy segments benefit from the rumor regardless of whether it is true. Every view is revenue. Every share extends their reach. Every comment, even the angry debunking ones, feeds the algorithm and keeps the video performing. So there is a direct financial incentive to keep the story going, to keep the mystery alive, to keep posting updates even when there are no updates. Because the audience came in expecting drama and they need to be fed, or they will click away. And that creates a feedback loop that has absolutely nothing to do with facts. The content exists to serve the content machine. And the verified, careful fact-check reporting is almost beside the point to that machine. It is an inconvenience at best and an obstacle at worst, because the machine does not need the facts to be true. It needs the story to keep moving. And a rumor keeps moving on its own. A fact just sits there. So the machine always picks the rumor every time. And the audience, which is real people with real beliefs, pays the price. Now, I'm not saying every single creator pushing this content was cynical or deliberately dishonest. Some of them genuinely believe what they are posting. Some of them think they are doing the work that mainstream media refuses to do. And that part, that genuine belief, is actually the scariest part, because it means the problem is not just bad actors. It is a system that rewards a certain kind of thinking so consistently and so generously that it starts to look like journalism even when it is not. And the people consuming it, the real audience, have almost no tools to tell the difference. That is the actual crisis, not the specific claims about Graham, but the structural inability of the information environment to sort real from fake fast enough to matter. The next time something big happens, the next time a major political figure dies, or a scandal breaks, or a crisis unfolds, the same cycle will repeat. The rumors will spread. The speculation will outpace the verification. And millions of people will believe things that are not true because the machine has trained them to trust the most sensational version of events. The policy vacuum that Graham's death leaves behind is also worth considering because almost nobody covered it. Graham was not just a political personality. He was not just a talking head or a fundraiser or a TV surrogate. He was a genuinely powerful legislative and foreign policy force. He had deep, decades-long relationships with foreign leaders. He had standing with people like Netanyahu, with Ukrainian officials, with European defense ministers, with people inside the NATO alliance structure. And those relationships were not just personal. They translated into actual leverage on actual policy debates. When Graham and Trump were aligned on something, the Senate moved. When Graham pushed back on something, which he did occasionally, quietly, the White House had to at least engage with the pushback. That kind of influence is rare. And it does not just get transferred to the next person in line, it dies with the person who built it. Right now, with Ukraine aid still contested, with Israel policy under constant pressure, with NATO facing questions about its future direction, with foreign adversaries watching every crack in the American political consensus. Losing a voice like Graham's is not a minor footnote. It is a real gap in American foreign policy capacity. And the question of who fills it, who takes up the Ukraine advocacy, who holds the line on defense commitments, who has the kind of credibility with foreign governments that takes decades to build, that is a question that will have real answers with real consequences. But that story got almost zero coverage because the algorithm decided that conspiracy content about Graham performed better than policy analysis about what comes next. And so the consequences are going unexamined while the internet debates things that were never verified in the first place. Here's the bottom line. Lindsey Graham was a complicated man who lived a complicated political life and left a complicated legacy. He made powerful enemies. He built unexpected alliances. He changed his positions when he decided the situation required it. And when he died, the internet did exactly what the internet does. It went looking for a story that was bigger and darker than the facts could support. It manufactured drama out of speculation. It shaped the beliefs of millions of people before a single credible fact had been checked. The real story, the verified one, the one with actual lasting consequences for actual American policy, got buried under a pile of thumbnails and conspiracy content. Trump saw it clearly. He pushed back. He shut down the speculation. He went to the funeral. He said the FBI had better things to do. And he was right about that specific thing, even if half the people watching this do not want to hear it from him. The facts are the facts. The sources are the sources. And the gap between what goes viral and what is actually true, that gap is one of the most dangerous features of the political information landscape in this moment. Not because it is new, but because it is getting faster and louder and harder to reverse. The next time a major political figure dies, the same cycle will repeat. The rumors will spread. The speculation will outpace the verification. And millions of people will believe things that are not true because the machine has trained them to trust the most sensational version of events. Understanding how that machine works, understanding its incentives and its mechanics is the first step to resisting its power. And that is the real lesson of the Lindsey Graham story. Not the specific allegations, which were never verified, but the pattern, the system, the way information moves through our culture and shapes what we believe. Stay tuned because the next story we are covering makes this one look like a warm-up. There is always another controversy, another rumor, another cycle of speculation and backlash. And understanding how to navigate that landscape, how to separate fact from fiction, how to resist the pull of the most sensational version of events, that is the single most important skill anyone can develop in this information environment. Because the machine is not going to change. The algorithms are not going to prioritize accuracy over engagement. The financial incentives are not going to shift toward responsible reporting. All of that is baked into the system. The only thing that can change is how we, as consumers of information, approach what we see online. The only thing that can change is our willingness to pause before sharing, to check before believing, to demand evidence before accepting a claim. That is the lesson of the Lindsey Graham story. And it is a lesson we will need to apply again and again as the next stories unfold.